All right. So again, welcome. What I would like you to do right now is to go ahead and do your entrance tickets. We have two vocabulary words today. One of them is russification, and the other is satellite. It is not the satellite that you see up in the sky. Yes.
Like the natural satellite?
Yes, Janelle.
Yeah. Or no satellites.
Okay, so Janelle, you haven't been here, but this semester we're doing our entrance tickets. We will not do an exit ticket. The entrance tickets are going to be putting your vocabulary words in Google Keep and adding an image to that, and then also copying the lesson plans for the day and putting those in Google Keep. I know that you weren't here, so I'm going to show you. Let me go ahead and I'm going to present.
Miss, do you mean like satellites as in like the moon?
Yeah, like
So I
natural
mean satellites as in communities, countries that are controlled by other countries.
Oh, I think of it like
Geographical
satellites.
satellites.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about
Yeah.
that.
Different type of satellite. So whenever, if you're looking up the definition, but it's actually there for you already.
So
But
there's
if you
like,
need- where
so
do you
there's
look it up?
3 definitions, right?
So,
There are two.
so would Puerto Rico be a satellite of the United States? It's
I mean, it's really territory, but
Yeah,
it
no,
could be,
Cuba.
yes.
because people would talk about like how they didn't want Puerto Rico to become a state or stuff like that. I didn't really understand, but I got the general idea.
Right. Well, and it's just, you know, there are pluses and minuses to behold having a territory. But, okay, so let's go ahead and, Ms. Janelle, if you will go to your classwork tab in Google Classroom, under topics right here on the right-hand side, if you will scroll all the way down, left-hand side, sorry, under resources, I have an instructional video for vocabulary entrance ticket tutorial. So if you will go ahead and watch that, not right now, watch it during lunch. And then that way, if you have any questions afterwards, during lunch, you can let me know and I will walk you through it, okay? Does that sound good? Janelle?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mel. Okay, so those of you at home and here, today I'm not going to walk you through your entrance tickets. What I would like you to do, what I would like you to do is to do your entrance tickets right now. So you'll need to go to your lesson plans. Remember, you should have your 5 tabs open. You need to have, of course, Google Classroom, and have it on your classwork tab would be the best. Google Meet, Google Keep, your textbook, which is the McGraw-Hill textbook, and you do need to go through ClassLink to access it. And then, of course, you need to have the lesson plans open. The lesson plans are Google Classroom under the classwork tab. If you will scroll down to Cycle 4, Week 1. Does anybody have any questions on how to find those? Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Actually, it's going to be more like 4 minutes. Okay, so at 11:26, we are going to start. I'm going to go with So here's your textbook. Scroll all the way down. Yeah, all the way down. Do I have to go? Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah, that helps you, yeah, sure. Okay, and then let's see.
Oh, I thought you said blind.
And to join the Google Meet, that's right here. You should.
Oh, I get it.
I'm talking about myself, Stephen.
All right, and then let's go back to.
I get it.
You're dumb. Took you a while.
And
There's this other one.
let's
It's kind
scroll
of bad.
down, it's kind of
There's a
the
couple
last
there.
one.
It is
And
barely.
then that.
You know, he's always treating colors.
Just click on that too.
Always does Jordan something. But fuck her hair, man.
Okay,
She
get to
cut it
Google.
big.
Go ahead and.
Yeah.
Open up another tab.
I want to.
Don't
And
get
it's
it.
gonna be,
I can take
Drop
Joe
down.
I hear,
Powers.
I
I always get taker fades. But then I let them grow out for like 2-3 months. And then I cut them every year.
That's what happened, or you make her hair for like a month or a year.
I said like 3
Okay,
months.
so you're right here, you're gonna use your
I just let it grow.
And this one we're gonna call vocabulary.
Being funny.
Okay, and let's do one more. And this one's gonna be lesson objectives.
Maybe young people should.
OB,
Bro,
JE,
am I bald?
CT,
People think I should.
Are you bald? Am I bald?
I don't.
okay?
I don't know why I don't know why my legs are like that.
How do they look like that?
Exactly. You don't have no hair or nothing. It's like,
It's weird.
I don't even shave or
You're on
nothing.
that bald face.
Yeah, keep going, because where the red is, that's your first.
Look at those cats.
So you're gonna highlight, you know how to do that?
I messed up.
Look at that.
I see you dripping.
Yeah. you
Ah,
can-
this
you can
torch
hold it
is
so
muscle.
long, one
Dripping in
time.
chinches, bro. Dripping in
Both of those.
chinches.
Both of
those. Chinches.
Or you get pajamas.
I know.
That's it.
I told you that they were. Dripping in the trenches.
I wish I had a shirt that matched this the only thing to post.
I mean, it's not bad. Why
Now,
do you have so much polo?
Because I like Polo, it's my favorite brand.
Okay.
What'd you say?
My favorite band is Children.
Oh,
It's like Oliver Nike. I like Reebok. Bro.
Hey, can you give me that drink? Hold it to you, Daddy.
okay, for your, the vocabulary.
Thank
uh,
I just like how they feel. It's comfortable.
It looks like
It's expensive as hell. I know. I do.
So,
What's the point? I feel like. What's the point of spending
I
money?
don't know. I feel like
oh, you did
the
the last
people that live
one.
rich are people that live in ass houses.
I feel like the people that are rich, they don't like go out and buy money.
Like they wear Walmart.
Yeah.
Like Bill Gates.
Yeah. No give no.
Alright, so
You were like
these are your
basic
lesson
suit.
plans in.
Or you wear like.
Walmart shoes.
Yeah, no,
I mean,
right.
he's a fucking dude. You can do anything.
I mean, these are like, I'm trying to, these are like, so you're not gonna.
All the poor people like
I know
to wear
that
expensive
on the basketball game yesterday,
I was like, so how
there was a fight with
I am.
Yeah.
I do live in
Okay, just do the word for now, and then it's gonna work on your questions.
Ayana.
That is crazy though.
Yanni, Yanni? No, I'm stupid, come.
Where is
Do you
y'all?
understand?
He moved classes.
I live in.
Okay, well, I'm gonna
I
all
miss
of
it.
them.
They all got moved out. Like literally.
What about Pedro?
Alex, Pedro. So Joseph.
And then what's this
Yeah,
taken
this
out?
class sucks though.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they used to make it
Title,
funny.
so, where's the
Dude,
title?
No, I just hate when they
What's your
bully
favorite
those
brand?
kids and they're weird.
Look at Boo.
Did you get it?
Okay, and then we'll do the,
So what was your favorite brand?
yeah, the definition. And then you'll search for an image, and then do the same thing. Does that make sense?
I guess you.
I can help you
Honestly, I
with
live in
this.
this asshole. I live in a 2-bedroom trailer.
Okay, so I trust that everybody has
I don't like.
There are 2 vocabulary words.
I see you get my image.
She needs the vocabulary thing like me, but I forgot how to do it, so I can't help you.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna stop this for a second. Well, it's fine, it's better. Okay,
I need
so you're looking, and you have your labels, no, you don't have
So
them
let me
yet.
tell you a
Okay,
story.
so you need to
About
edit
3
labels.
years ago,
Yeah, what's this?
I was living with my mom. And this is, I wear clothes. I didn't even wear polo or nothing. I wear some ass shoes and everything. My mom started, doing
You down about me.
and then my mom started doing that. And
Vocabulary.
then, yeah, it broke me, like, I got so sad, I got depressed.
C-A-P,
How old are you, like 11?
Yeah. And then I went to live with my aunt. My life came to an adventure. That's how I got the Concords. I was learning so much stuff from Uncle. Like, my uncle cheated me like the glasses on son.
Did you like royalty?
Yeah. I asked him, I was like, yo, you know what's cool? A gaming PC. And next week, I got a gaming PC.
No way.
Yes.
I'm gonna ask you.
Huh?
My dad won't give me one, bro. How much was it?
It was like, okay, the PC was like a couple, wait, what is it called, the monitor? Yeah, it was like a couple $100. But then the computer, where these called a big old box.
PC.
Yeah, that cost like $1,000.
Yeah, you got one of the expensive ones.
Yeah. And then, guess what? My mom, she claimed that she got healthier, and guess what? I moved back, and I lost everything.
You didn't even
Oh,
hear me
pulling
say
out
that.
upgrade on
Yeah.
the town.
Y'all didn't know that?
Oh.
No, German bro, get all the girls.
Oh, for real? Now that's not cool if you get a girl for your phone.
Nah, I'm gonna keep the same wallpaper. That's what I'm doing.
Now you get all girls.
Okay, yeah, so which picture do you want?
Look, club hole, man.
But my uncle, he started giving me these photos. That's why I got all these photos.
Okay, bro.
And all these shoes.
You give me all your clothes and all your over the PC.
Yeah.
Oh, I hope you're done.
I don't care.
Give me your PC then.
I don't have a PC anymore. Not anymore. This was 3 years ago.
Why?
Because he sold it. Because I moved out. Why? I didn't even
Why
take
did you get to keep it?
because it was too expensive. And I already did it once.
No, you still wanted it.
Yeah. I wanted it.
Okay, guys, we went way past the time. I do apologize. So let me go ahead and take roll. I do need you to say present if you're here.
Oh.
I want to remind you guys before we start, phones need to be put in your backpack or in the phone pocket.
I forgot my Simpson.
Okay. Mercedes? Daniel? I'm sorry, Colin.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Here's the-
Tiana? Sarah? Edward? Allie? Allie?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Anthony? Anthony? Joshua? Thank you. Miss Green?
Here.
Jaslyn? Bryson? Bryson? Jersey?
Here.
Thank you. Angel? James?
Here.
EJ?
Here.
Ethan? Thank you, Ethan.
Those look nice.
Salahi?
Yeah, they came from China. Didn't like them.
Janelle?
I'm pretty sure some of these
Joe?
shorts came from China.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm taking attendance.
Everything comes
Alexa?
from China. Even expensive foods.
Christopher?
Where are you? Are you
Made in
taking
China.
it?
I'm doing attendance right now. Yes, Janelle.
Miss, you cannot do that.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why. Okay. See, Christopher? Ambrea? Talon? Okay.
Charming.
Okay, so now, guys, let's begin. So you should have your books open. You should have, does anybody, okay, I know that I need to help. Okay, if you will turn your speakers off.
This is me swearing.
Okay, no, that's fine. You just get so much background noise. Okay, so today we are going to talk about, we're still in chapter 14. We're dealing with the Russian core. And today we're going to talk more about the human aspect. So we're really going to dive into the history of Russia. The history of Russia is really large, it's really expansive, and so it's really difficult to try to narrow it down into one lesson, but we are going to do that, okay? But it will just give you an idea of how things have changed and how the territory has changed. So to get us started, what I'm going to do is and look for these words, okay, or the meanings of it, okay, because we talked about our vocabulary words today are Russification, which is when it's a government program that it actually required everyone in the country, or in the empire actually, to speak Russian, and they had to become a Christian. Because as Russia expanded and they conquered more territory, they had a lot of non-Russian people that were under their rule, and they wanted everybody to be the same. So everybody, it was mandatory that you learned to speak Russian.
Wait, so they're Christians?
At this time. Okay,
Wow.
this is Russification. It has gone through a lot of changes, but this is one of them, yes. Okay, and anyway, so just wanted everybody to be uniform. They didn't want anybody to be different. They wanted, when you saw Russia, you knew that everybody there was Russian. Yes.
I don't want to book a chapter on this.
Okay, James, can you show them how to get to chapter 14 on this book? Thank you. Okay, and then the other word I want you to look for is and we may not actually say the word, but think about what it means, okay?
What are you talking about? You don't even know the word.
But we're.
Your vocabulary.
Oh, no, no.
Russification, which is what I just talked about, and the other one is satellite. Okay, those are our two vocabulary words for today. I want you to think about it. I want you to try to find where it's mentioned.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's fine, and it may not be, the word may not be satellite, but it may be the thought of, or the idea of a country that is controlled by another country, okay? Most of the Eastern European countries were controlled by the Soviet Union.
I love the Soviet Union.
And it's just, when we're talking about like the 19th, 20th century,
I like
Oh,
mostly
I
the
like
20th
the
century for
that was
Soviet Union.
great.
Okay, so let's go on. We are going to watch a short video. This is, like I said, almost impossible, but we are going to do Russian history in a nutshell in 8 minutes.
no way. That's not even possible.
It seems like it,
I
so
like-
let's
Can
I
go.
like
you do American history in 8 minutes? Is that even possible?
Yeah, it's,
I like the Cold War, because they're trying to race for everything.
the race for space.
That was pretty cool.
And
Then they built nuclear bombs. for
yeah,
the-
they're building nuclear bombs, and they were like,
Like, they were like this, like, they were so close, but not like, they didn't argue at all.
So I need to,
every country was scared because only America and Russia had nukes.
hang on just a second.
Just satisfying.
It'll be okay. I just have to, yeah, it's just gonna take me a second.
Miss, this girl got Hamilton to the
Guys, please be patient with me. I am just going
I
to.
think he wasn't expecting this.
Because I was using my laptop and now I'm using Russia's laptop.
I got a whole pink shirt. Pink is my gay color.
You said that.
Everybody
There's like wings, not pigs. No, wings.
Your pimp.
Russia is the largest country.
Have you played the new Call of Duty?
No.
I have. I played the zombies though. I only played zombies. I haven't played the casino. I only have some at uncle's house. So I was like, you know the new Call of Duty? Yeah. I said, I'm playing it. Dude, it's weird because it tells you how much damage you do to the zombies or how much health they have. And
Wait, no, World War II zombies. Oh, it's the train.
Okay, so guys, those of you at home, what I would like you to do is to go ahead and watch the video that I just posted, okay? If you will go, it's in the stream. It's called The Animated History of Russia.
oh, this? I see it, miss.
Okay, we'll watch it over here though.
Okay. Russia.
And I will.
Russia is the largest country on Earth, spanning an incredible 17 million square kilometers. But if you're anything like me, you're probably wondering how it got so big, and how it has become such a powerful political and social entity in our modern world. It not only takes the title of largest and most popular country and city in Europe, but also stretches far beyond Europe, across the Ural mountain range into Asia, taking up the largest portion of the continent. Principal history of Eastern Europe begins with the people the Greek writers called Slavs. The first Russian state was formed when a group of Eastern Slavs, later known as the Rus, elected a Viking chieftain to be their prince in 882 in the area between the Volga and Dnieper river basins. The state was soon expanded into the lands once held by the nomadic steppe peoples from Asia. The most important city they captured was Kiev, which is why historians refer to this part of Russia's history as the Kievan Rus. The Rus spoke a language called Proto-Eastern Slavic, which would slowly evolve into Russian and Ukrainian. The medieval Rus state adopted Christianity in 988, when Vladimir I introduced the religion from the Orthodox Christian Byzantine Empire. This is also why the Russians use the Cyrillic rather than the Latin alphabet, common in most Catholic nations. The Rus state slowly fragmented into competing princedoms, largely aided by the death of Yaroslav the Wise in the 11th century. The Rus were often at war with the nomadic tribes we will just call for simplicity's sake steppe peoples. These steppe peoples are integral to much of the history of Asia, and you'll see various factions of them popping up all over the place. Most steppe peoples originate from the Eurasian steppes, go figure, and were very good at horse riding and archery, such as the Volga Bulgars, Khazars, and Kipchaks. So with that out of the way, we can talk about the Mongols, who the Rus called Tatars. Under Genghis and Batu Khan, they invaded all the way into western Kievan Rus and established a state called the Golden Horde, with the Rus princedoms as their vassals. The Mongol Empire quickly fractured into smaller khanates, allowing for the growth of more powerful states such as Poland, Lithuania, and the Grand Duchy of Moscow. By 1480, both states absorbed much of the Golden Horde, becoming more rivals with each other than with the Tatars. By 1547, Moscow had become a regional power, with Ivan the Terrible being crowned the first Tsar, the Russian word for Caesar. After all, they did see themselves as the spiritual successors of the Romans, and the last remnant of Orthodox Christian.
Did you guys catch one of yesterday's vocabulary words?
Yeah, I heard it.
Does anybody remember? what it
Caesar.
was?
Wait, at this time, did America get discovered already?
Bro, you dumb?
Okay, stop.
It was season,
No, not this time.
Captain or
Caesar. It was the word Caesar, not Caesar, Czar. The word Czar,
Oh,
which
Tsar,
was,
mama.
and it even said in here, which was a derivative from the word Caesar. Because this is like the third.
Christianity, debatable. Ivan also renamed the state Russia after the Rus who inhabited it. In 1580, Russia conquered the Khanate of Sibir, marking the first time Russia had expanded east of the Ural Mountains into Asia. The Russians renamed the mysterious new land Siberia after the Khanate had conquered. And do you think they stopped there? Well, spoiler alert, no. In 1601, the Russians faced a succession crisis as the beginning of the time of troubles. The country was in anarchy and in danger of being absorbed by Poland. Up to 1 in 3 of the population died, either due to war, famine, or plague. By 1613, the Russians elected Mikhail Romanov as the new Tsar, establishing the Romanov dynasty for the rest of the country's history. Michael ended the wars and began the slow process of rebuilding the fragmented country. From this point until the 19th century, Russia's economy was propped up by serfdom, effectively protecting Russia's rich and powerful by turning all their peasants into hereditary slaves. Yeah, history sucks sometimes. By 1667, Russia had become powerful enough to win the Russo-Polish War with the help of the subjugated steppe peoples called Cossacks. They expanded their territory into southeastern part of Poland. The Poles and the Russians had informally nicknamed the area Ukraina, derived from an old Slavic word for borderland. Get it? Because it was the border between Russia, Poland, and the Cossacks? Very creative. Anyway, one of Russia's most famous Tsars was Peter the Great. Peter was a reformer. He modernized the army, built the empire's first navy, traveled west and brought back ideas and technology of the Enlightenment, and also fashionable French clothing. He also expanded Russia's influence in the Black and Baltic Seas. The guy was basically in love with the West. After capturing a Baltic seaport from the Swedish Empire in the Great Northern War, Peter built a new city and founded it as the country's new capital, St. Petersburg. Russia also fought in the 7 Years' War, vying for power with their European neighbors. Another formidable Russian ruler was Catherine the Great, who was, well, not really Russian at all. She was born in Germany, and she killed her husband and seized the throne for herself. Her reign was one of reform and domination over the Crimean Khanate, as well as openly embracing the Enlightenment. In the mid-18th century, the Polish government collapsed due to a parliamentary limbo, and the surrounding Austria, Prussia, and Russia split the country in three during the Polish partitions, effectively wiping the country off the map for the next century, just in time for the Napoleonic Wars. Russia, just like the other European monarchies of the time, feared the repercussions of the French Revolution and joined the Second, Third, and Fourth coalitions against Napoleon, but they usually lost pretty badly. The French army captured the abandoned Moscow in 1812. However, the Russians would not surrender, preferring to burn the fields that the French hoped to live off. After waiting a few months, Napoleon retreated from Russia due to lack of supplies before conceding a Russian surrender, and when the snow set in and killed most of the French army, the tide was turned in Russia's favor. Russia's territorial gains had become so ambitious that it triggered a war with France and England, who helped the Ottomans in the Crimean War. In 1861, Russia abolished serfdom in an event now known as the Emancipation. Also, in the period between Napoleon and the Emancipation, it is worthwhile to note that Russia expanded her territory into Turkestan, China, the Southern Caucasus, Finland, and Russian America. And were it not for the Crimean War, they almost certainly would have won the entire Black Sea. They really loved land. In 1894, Tsar Nicholas II and the mystic Rasputin, who people thought secretly controlled him, became the last emperor of Russia. There were revolts against the political system for many decades, and the monarchy was slowly losing its power. As an ally of Serbia, Russia aimed to protect the Baltic Slavs from the Austro-Hungarian invasion during World War I. The chaos and famine of the war led to the two Russian revolutions. The first opposed the Tsar and set up the provincial government, highly influenced by the Soviets. The Soviets were basically workers' unions inspired by Marxism. Vladimir Lenin's Bolshevik Party came to power in the Soviets and seized power in the October Revolution, creating the RSFSR and the Russian Civil War between the Reds and the Whites. The Civil War led to the breakaway of Poland, the Baltic states, and Finland. In 1922, the RSFSR was renamed the USSR, a much catchier name. After the death of Lenin, Russia's most famous communist-era dictator came to power, Joseph Stalin. Born in the old Russian Empire, now modern-day Georgia, Stalin was an aggressive expansionist, go figure. He had aims of spreading communism throughout the world. He also resented Russia's territorial losses during the Civil War. He killed and exiled millions of people he deemed anti-revolutionary. With failed diplomacy with the Western European nations, Stalin entered into the non-aggression pact with Nazi Germany, hoping to regain much of the land lost during the First World War in Poland and the Baltic Sea. On the 1st and 17th of September, Germany and Russia invaded and divided Poland in two, beginning the Second World War. Originally in an uneasy alliance with Hitler, the tide of war turned with Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union. The invasion killed more troops than any other theater of battle, and the German armies came just 24 kilometers from Moscow. However, the winter blizzard set in, turning the battle in the Soviets' favor. After the defeat of Nazi Germany, Stalin held on to the Soviet-occupied territories, enveloping them into the USSR or creating communist puppet states. The Western Allies treated the Soviet bloc with suspicion, in which the Soviets developed nuclear weapons and became one of the most powerful nations in history. The USSR was the first nation to put a man in space during the American-Soviet space race. After decades of poverty and political unrest, as well as involvement in numerous proxy wars with the United States, the USSR finally collapsed under the weight of the one-party communist state. The Russian Federation was formed as a newly democratic republic. The two most important Eastern Bloc states, Poland and East Germany, broke away from Russian control, and the eastern parts of Russia also broke away to form two new countries, Belarus, or White Russia, and Ukraine. The rise of Vladimir Putin, a former KGB officer, into the prime ministry and presidency of Russia brought with it renewed foreign policy. Putin became involved in the Syrian civil war, the East Russian separatism movements in Ukraine, and the politics of many Eastern European countries. Modern-day Russia's future is uncertain, as is the motives of its leader. However, the nation is in a state of peace, will be hosting the Football World Cup in 2018, and is emerging once again as a world superpower.
2 years ago.
Thanks for watching, everyone.
So, that was a lot of information in 8 minutes. It's almost impossible to grasp your head. But the point is that Russia has changed so much from the very beginning to what it is now. Okay, so let's open our books up. Okay, I'm going to share. Okay, so when we were, so what was one of the things I asked you to listen for?
Starlight.
Satellites.
Is
So-
this like Poland? Poland was like satellite?
Right, and especially during the Soviet era, at the very end, he didn't call them satellites. He called them something states.
Territorial states?
Do what?
Territorial?
Not territorial. He called them puppet states. Did you catch that?
I didn't
You
catch
didn't
that.
catch that, okay. Yeah, so he was talking about where, they had a lot of land, okay, a lot of territories they conquered, and they created puppet states, which just meant that the states were there, but they had no control. Russia controlled it all, or the Soviet Union controlled it all. Okay. Okay, and what about, he kind of talked a little bit about Russification. He didn't call it that, but where he did say that everybody had to speak
Russian.
Russian, yes, and they all became Christians. But EJ, just as you were talking about, yes, that was during that era. But then when the Romanovs, who since the 1600s, they were the last family to rule, okay? When they were killed off, they planned a coup, and they got them out of office. So the Romanovs were no longer in control. That was the last of the absolute monarchy in Europe. When that happened, then the Soviet Union was formed. When the Soviet Union was formed, they decided, oh no, we are no longer going to make everybody speak Russian and everybody speak Christian. Now it was totally different. Now it was, oh no, now nobody can have any religion. So then they were atheists. You were not allowed to.
Believe in anything.
Why are they
Believe in
atheists?
anything, because atheists, they don't believe in anything.
Atheists don't believe that there's a higher being.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought atheist means that God died.
No.
No.
I mean, that's,
And
they're kind of stupid,
atheist
but.
is that you don't believe in any higher. I need all the cell phones put away, not just in your pocket, in your backpacks. Thank you. So yes, so atheism is where it's basically an absence of God, of a higher being. And so that was the case for the USSR because they did not want anybody believing in a higher God, a higher power.
Where is their issue?
So, but let's go ahead and get into the book. Okay? And if you will notice on, so I guess, I need to. Okay, so guys, at home you should be back. The video is over. Okay, so we know Russia started in the 600s, so it's very old, with mostly the Slav farmers. They were ruled, and it was known, the states there were known as the Kievan Rus. The Kievan, like from Kiev, Rus. They were ruled by princes, okay? And they had most of the Baltic and the Black Seas where they did most of their trade. In the early 1200s, Mongols from Central Asia invaded Kiev and many of the Slav territories. So the Mongols were allowed them to self-rule, but the Mongols had control of the military for more than 200 years.
Dude, I feel like, history is bad, like, we were, like, really bad. I mean, we're not great either, but, like, Now it's like a lot
Oh,
better.
you're saying Russia is, okay, so, and we will get to that, yeah, Russia right now, they're at peace, but they struggle. Okay, their economy is slowly picking up, most of it, okay, but they went through a lot. So, the Soviet Union, because they had such control, it was complete, when we were talking about the spectrum, you remember, so on the far right, we had communism, and on the far left is communism, far right we have free enterprise. They were definitely on the far left. Okay. So the government controlled it, they owned everything, they owned all the factories, all the manufacturers, they owned everything. They decided what would be made, how many would be made, what the price would be, and where it would be sold.
So
They did
you
everything.
couldn't make your own business?
No.
So they just wanted the rich to get richer and the poor to like stay poor.
No, they're actually, what they wanted was everybody to be equal.
Oh, but that's not.
So the government is the only one that got rich, if at all. They're the only ones that make money.
So they just wanted the civilians to be on safe.
So the civilians that's part of communism. Okay? It's where everybody's equal.
I feel like I like our economy because it gives a fair chance for people to be rich or like. if they
Right,
want
you
to.
have the opportunity to, if you have the drive or, yes. But back then, in the Soviet Union, it wasn't that way. But because the Soviet Union, there were a lot of things that went on, they had civil wars, but they had to pay for the military, they had to, basically, all the welfare for all the Russians, okay, everybody in the Soviet Union, they paid for everything. Okay. So, which was not much, they didn't make anybody wealthy by any means. But it's really difficult to sustain that, especially when you have more people, then
It's more
you
money.
have fewer resources. So it started crumbling. And that's what led to the failure of the Soviet Union. So when it was dissolved, then we had a lot of freedom. So then people now have the opportunities for free enterprise. They can have their own business, they can make their own stuff, they can have shops and sell things and make a profit. But the problem is that you had to have some kind of money somehow to invest in something, So now we have people that are making a lot of money, but then you have a lot of people that are really struggling because now they don't have the government to support them the way they had, even though it was not a very good system. I mean, they weren't getting a lot anyway, but now they don't even have that. So it was a lot all at once, but they are starting to come out of that. So let's see here. And now I am going to have to get back into something. Okay, so then we went to the 1600s where we had Peter the First, who was also known as Peter the Great. He came to power, and he actually wanted to modernize Russia. And if you remember, he loved Western Europe, and so he wanted to do a lot of different things. He wanted to bring those in. So he had a strong military. He developed trade with Western Europe. He acquired many seaports. Let's see, and of course that's when St. Petersburg became the capital of Russia.
So it's like, was he like a good leader?
He was. Okay, so then, and he actually, so St. Petersburg, it actually was a wilderness, and they actually went in and cut down the trees, carved it out, and developed the city, St. Petersburg. So that's pretty amazing. And when doing so, then, because he also, this gave an access where you could see the Baltic Sea, so it was like a window to the west. Then in the 1700s, you had Catherine the Great, And she continued Russia's expansion. So she's the one that gained that long desired warm water port on the Black Sea. And so then after that, then we had the Romanovs, they continued expansion.
So how did it go from the rise to like take over the nation? That's never been easy.
So the very, very first one, okay, Alexander the Terrible, he was actually a Viking that they just kind of appointed.
Well,
And then it just kind of, yeah, that's what happened. Okay, so these, let's see. So, as they expanded, I mean, the Russian territory was, the empire was massive. You had both Eastern and Central Europe. Okay, so with that, lots of non-Russian people, okay, were under their rule now. But they wanted, as we said, everybody to be the same. And so what was that one thing that they did that became a government policy where everybody would speak Russian and become a Christian? What was that called? Russification. Good job. Awesome. Do what?
Is it crucifixion or prison?
Russification.
Crucifixion.
Like Russification. Russian. Making them Russian.
Oh, Russian with it.
Yeah, it's, you can pronounce it Russification.
I'll say crucifixion. Like,
Not crew, it's with an R. R-U-S, like Russia. Okay, so then we had Tsar. And what's a Tsar?
Ruler.
A ruler.
yeah, like the leader.
So we had Tsar Alexander II. Okay. He had some reforms that he proposed, which allowed the serfs, who were like slaves, he allowed them to move to the cities. But the problem is that there were so many, the conditions were so terrible and the wages were so low that they were really struggling. And so these non-Russian people that were from these new colonized regions, they faced a lot of prejudice. A lot of people didn't really care for them because they were different. But again, Russification became policy. Okay? And then if we rush all the way through to 1891, then we have Tsar Alexander III. Okay? And he's the one that expanded Russia into Siberia. And he actually is the one who constructed the Trans-Siberian Railroad, which this is what changed a lot, because now they had more means of transportation, people could settle, you could transport goods from one place to another, because remember, Siberia is full of what?
Lakes.
Natural
Rivers.
resources.
Oh.
Right. Okay, lots of natural resources, so now they had a way to get it back and forth. So, cha-ching, okay? Okay, and let's see, it was completed in 1916. And that railroad is nearly 6,000 miles long. That's a long railroad.
Where is?
Okay, and so then we get into right before World War I, okay? And we had this German philosopher by the name of Karl Marx, who was the father of communism. And so he was the one who, his idea was that there would be public ownership of all land and means of production, okay? And a classless society, which means that everybody would be the same. So that kind of caught on, okay, because during World War I, which started in 1914, there were lots of strikes and demonstrations because Russian workers weren't happy. They weren't getting what they needed to do. They were under so many hardships. Okay. And so they wanted their freedom and they wanted food. They were hungry. And not just food, but the conditions were not right. And all of this revolution, this revolting, all these protests, it set off the Russian Revolution of 1917. And this is when Tsar Nicholas and his family, the Romanovs, were murdered. Okay. And so, after the end of the last absolute monarchy in Europe, then that is when the communist-controlled Union of Soviet Social Republics, the USSR. That's when what we know as the Soviet Union began. And of course, they played a vital role in the Allied victory over Germany in World War II. Because do you remember, am I getting ahead of myself? I don't think so. Okay, so remember that Germany and the Soviet Union, they formed a pact. Okay, they signed a pact saying, guess what? We are not gonna fight each other. We're gonna, we'll help each other, but we're not gonna fight each other. Okay. Well, it didn't quite happen that way because Germany kind of reneged and said, oh no, we are going, we want your land too. So they attacked and they were winning. But then guess what? Winter set in, and what are the conditions like in Soviet Union?
Cold,
Cold,
freezing.
cold. And the Germans were like, whoa, this is way too cold, we can't do this. And so the Soviet Union was able to prevail and push them back, and then they actually went through and conquered more areas like Poland and such like that.
Yeah, lucky.
Yes. And so it was good for us because that was how Germany that was the
Germany was trying to take over the world.
Yeah.
so
They
otherwise
almost
we
did.
might not be who we are today. Okay.
Thank God they did.
Okay, so but then after the Soviet Union, they occupied more territories, and so they ended up with what under communist rules? These countries that are controlled by another country?
Satellites.
Satellites, awesome. And then following World War II, the Soviet Union was engaged in political and ideological war with the West, right? Because we were saying it shouldn't be like that.
Cold War.
And then the Cold War, yes, that was the Cold War. And then along with the Cold War, we also had the race for space. Okay, so everybody wanted to be the first ones up in space, first ones never, yes. And so, and the Russians were the first ones to have anyone orbited.
At least we went to the moon.
Yes, we were the first ones.
Yeah, the first.
Okay, so, but as I was saying, that the enormous cost of the Soviet Union's military and they just didn't have a very good economic policy, it weakened their role in the world. And so in 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev, who was a reformed official, he didn't like the communism type role. Okay? He became the leader of the Soviet Union, and he instituted a policy, and you need to know this, it's called perestroika. Perestroika. Okay? Yes. And if we click on that, it's a restructuring. So they wanted to restructure to reform the Soviet economy and the government. Okay? Because he knew that there was a lot of people taking money that they shouldn't have been taking. Okay, and he also had a policy of greater political openness called glasnost. Yeah, and it's just basically, so now, because the Soviet Union had controlled everything, even the arts, they let people know what you could write, what you couldn't, and so people would smuggle their stuff to other countries to get it published. But then those people in Russia could never read it because you couldn't read it there. Okay, so same thing, but when it was worked off with this glasnost, then what happened is now things were free. So you could write whatever you wanted to write. You could read what you wanted
What's
to.
it like? But can you still have freedom of speech? Like you say something about the government and not be punished for it?
I wouldn't do that in Russia. They don't have, it's not a complete free republic,
Not
It is, they are still, if you say something about food, you may not come back home,
Wait,
Oh.
like today, right?
even today.
I love Biden. I love Putin. He's the best guy ever.
Yeah, so, anyway, but, so then of course those satellites that were controlled by the Soviet Union, okay, they started replacing their communist governments with non-communist governments, okay. And so, but then in 1991, a failed coup led to the collapse of the Soviet government, and so many of the countries started just declaring their independence from the Soviet Union. So now there are 15 independent countries
Dang.
including Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. I think this is a good. So right here.
I don't think most people say that we'll lose to Russia.
We would.
You don't think what?
Most people say that we'll lose to Russia.
We would.
No, we wouldn't.
We're gonna
Yeah.
smack
I
it.
Yeah.
just, it
We smack
depends.
Russia.
Okay.
Who?
They might have one
Yes.
nuclear bomb.
Yeah, I know, right? I got you.
Yeah, my take.
Okay, so if you'll notice right here, you can see Russia, okay? Right here's the Ukraine, right here's Belarus. Okay. But all of this, let me show you where, okay. This was all of Russia right here, all of this purple. And now we see the way it is now. The 15 separate independent countries. So we are already past time. Okay, so that will be all. We will continue tomorrow. But you guys just make sure that you have your entrance tickets done. And let's see, I think that Khalil is already done. So hopefully she'll be. All right, everybody have an awesome lunch and see you tomorrow.
Russia.
Yeah, I hate to. We are so lucky.